3, 2, 1, 0.
I realize that I have friends that can't even fathom to answer the damn question. My friends in the ghettos, in the streets, few in the projects. Few see, few realize. And it pains me. This pain is frustration. This pain is hatred. This pain is anger. Anger. My anger, your anger, our anger. Anger at my privilege, afforded to you by your father, grandfather, founding father. Anger is in me. And yet, over time, this anger dissipates. Understanding settles in. Empathy settles in. Compassion settles in. And then, revelation. A revelation that I am a soldier, an educator, fighting against oppression, ignorance, and injustice.
I say that because it is usually if you study the structure of the Negro community, economically, politically, civically, psychologically, and otherwise, it's controlled by the white liberal, who usually poses as the friend of the Negro, who actually differs from the white conservative in the same way that the fox differs from the wolf. Their appetite is the same. Their motives are the same. It's only their mannerisms and methods that differ.
It's worse than that. It's morally wrong because you're making the assumption that, the old racist assumption, that the group defines the content of the spirit. It's like, there isn't a more racist claim than that. There's not a more sexist claim than that I know what you're like because I know something about your external features.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
I had to remind him that he was a black person, so he can't vote for Donald Trump.
There is nothing wrong with your screen. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling the messaging in this transmission. We will tell you the topics you may speak about. We will remove any speech we deem unfit. We will identify and protect you from all that is evil. You need only put your full trust in us. We are the government, and we are here to help.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our third episode here at the Patriot Think Tank. Hello, everybody, and welcome. I am George. This is Jack. Today's topic, if you did not see it in the title, will be systemic racism and the poison of critical race theory. So, Jack, you want to do a little intro? Say hello.
Hello.
There you go.
See my
now it's official.
See my T-shirt today.
The Grateful Dead.
Yeah, you know, I never thought growing up in the 60s and 70s that being a conservative, I would be a radical. I'm thinking about growing my hair back.
And now here we are, right? And
I'm telling you.
We talked about that early on, like who we're trying to attract with this show. And while we want to attract everyone, you know, the understanding was classic liberals would be the ones who might be drawn in these days, right? The psycho leftist, you know, because the Democratic Party's kind of broken that way, right? You got the Kennedy Democrat, and then you've got, you know, Antifa and Sunrise.org, you know, clowns. But you know, with respect to the show today, so quite a few things we wanted to cover. We really want to kind of get to the heart of this whole systemic racism thing. Also diving into critical race theory. If you're not aware of what it is, it's basically it's an educational coursing that's very prevalent in our universities today. Virtually every one of them, or at least every state, not every university, but every state has universities in it that are teaching this to our kids. And, you know, it's important, I think, for people to understand what it is and how that works, right? So, and Jack, you know, we talked about this for a while, you know, regarding it, and critical race theory, it just angers me to the core. And, you know, I can't wait till we get to some of these videos where, you know, where we're just kind of showing good, you know, good free thinking students, you know, questioning these psycho activists. But like, you know, and really it's been going on, you know, since civil rights, right? It's been going on. They've been owning this message, and, you know, and really the mythical Southern strategy that really progressive historians have just grabbed onto early on. Once they realized the civil rights battle was lost, and I don't want to act like there were no Democrats who were supporting the Civil Rights Act, because there were, right? They were. It was necessary for Democrats and Republicans to buy on in order to get it through, and there were on both sides. But it's important to outline the nonsense of the Southern strategy, because, and I'm not going to go too deep into it. We may do another video just on the Southern strategy debunking. But if you go through Google and you start reading all these articles, you know, the ever all-knowing Wikipedia and all the other articles, even on government websites, because progressive historians have owned this for so long, you'll hear a tale of Richard Nixon literally unilaterally turning the entire Republican Party against what it had stood for its entire existence, beginning with Abe Lincoln. And because he wanted to get more votes in the South, he was able to successfully, in their view, completely turn the party philosophy around, while simultaneously, while this is going on, Democrats did the exact same thing. They suddenly had this epiphany that, you know what, the Ku Klux Klan is bad. We shouldn't have started the Ku Klux Klan, right? But the reality is they did. And they didn't change, okay? And while some Democrats, as well as there were some Republicans at the time who were against civil rights bill, the percentages of Republicans who voted for it versus the percentage of Democrats who voted against it is significantly in the Republicans' favor. But there were enough of both to be able to pass the legislation. So what did they do? They grabbed the narrative, made up this story about Richard Nixon wanting to get Southern votes. Richard Nixon's campaigns, if you go back and look at them, were all about, you know, yeah, he was bashing people, but it wasn't based on race. He was going after hippies. He was going after, you know, that whole white counterculture that was coming up, the acid droppers. Yeah, you know, the acid droppers and all that. That's what his campaign was going against, right? It wasn't a racially charged campaign. And the fact of the matter is, you know, they also, in all of these articles, when you read them, they'll tell you, well, the Dixie Democrats, who conservatives love to throw up there, but the leftists, what they're learning in school is that the Dixie Democrats all turned into Republicans. Of course, I challenge anyone to find an article that actually names the ones that did. There were two, okay? There were two who actually made the switch. Strom Thurmond was one of them, okay? And Strom Thurmond claimed that he was, you know, he had seen the light, and, you know, he was looking at things differently. His philosophy changed. You know, whether you believe that or not is not necessarily relevant. He went, because when he moved over to the Republican Party, he almost immediately started hiring blacks was one of the first senators ever to do it, to hire blacks into high positions of his cabinet. And you could say, oh, well, he just did that because, you know, because he was trying to, you know, make a statement or whatever. And you know what? You're probably right. Okay, let's say he did it for that. The reality is he was coming over to the Republicans, so he had to do that, right? Like, he had to do that, because they're not going to take him if he's not doing things like that. And that's the true reality of the climate that we were in. There was no switch. No one ever changed. The idea that everyone just suddenly, for some votes in the South, to change their entire political philosophies at the same exact time just happened to be right when the civil rights battle was lost by the Democrats. Okay, that now, you know, this sudden need to switch comes into play. Okay, what it was controlling the narrative, and we'll do a whole piece on this, because I could do a whole show just on the nonsense of the switch. But the reason I brought it up was because this has been taught in our schools Okay, this has been taught in our schools since probably 1970, right? 70 something. When was Nixon in? When
was in the 70s, yeah.
68, right? Something like that.
Well, yeah.
No,
I
68
mean,
he lost, right?
yeah. Well, the late 60s, but really the 70s.
Yeah. So I don't have the year in front of me, but that's not hard to look up when Nixon won his first election. That's the campaign but they didn't start the argument during the campaign. This came out later. This theory came out years later. Okay, this wasn't, nobody was talking about a Southern strategy when the so-called Southern strategy was going down. Okay, this was looking back and going, all right, how do we change this narrative, and then successfully doing it. It's on government websites because these are all progressive historians. So it's everywhere. It's in textbooks. It's been taught to generations of people. Okay, and that's the reason why I'm bringing it up, because it's very relevant to what we're about to go into with this critical race theory madness and how pervasive it's becoming. And while it hasn't, most people are still sane enough to blow it off, but in the end, when you look at our intro video and we had that one kid doing that crazy speech, right? That was 10 years ago. Okay, that was in 2011. All right, that kid couldn't have been more than 15, 16 years old. So he's 25, 26 right now. Who knows what this kid, what kind of poison has been pumped into this kid's head going further, right? For the next 8 to 10 years. He's clearly got parents who thought it was okay to send him to a white privilege conference, right? So it's crazy to me, and it's called the Privilege Institute. Like, there's a thing out there. It's a thing. It really exists. It's existed since, like, I don't know. It used to be the White Privilege Conference, and now the White Privilege Conference is a part of the Privilege Institute. But they've been holding these since 2020, 1999. I mean, is that crazy? Like, where have I been all this time that I didn't know that organizations, and it's not like they're tiny. Like the conferences they show on their website, there are links below to their website. The conferences they show on their website are well packed. Like, there's hundreds, if not 1,000 or more people at these events.
Well, George, the funny thing is, I think a lot of people fall into the where have I been type category. Let's face it, when COVID hit, everybody has to go home and stay in the house. Yeah, you're working, or maybe you're not. But now you start doing some research. You start thinking about things and looking into it a little bit deeper. Now, some folks may not take it to the extent that you and I take it, but that's why we're here. But I think that's where we've been. We've been busy leading our lives, watching what's going on, but maybe not digging as deeply as we should. Meanwhile, these kids are growing up like we all did. When we were kids, they told us the sky's blue. Look up in the air. Oh, that's blue, right? Well, if they told us the sky was green, then we would just call the sky green. And so these kids only know what they've heard. And it's very surface level material, as you and I have found out. I mean, we're going to be showing some, these folks today what lies beneath the surface of some of this.
Yeah, and what I encourage people to do is not necessarily take our word for it, right? The whole idea here and the whole concept of what we're doing is we're trying to get people. So if you hear me say something, if you see me provide a source that you think there's a counter source to, I want to see it, okay? I don't want to fight with you about it. I want to see it because I want to look at it. And if it warrants me changing a position on something, I'm all for it, okay? I'm all for it. But right now, when I look into, there's a disconnect between the society at large that you see on a day-to-day basis and the society at large that you're getting portrayed in our universities, in the media, and everywhere else. And that disconnect is very real. I keep hearing these things come out, and I don't believe that they're, I don't like to speak for everyone, right? But, when it comes to things like critical race theory and systemic racism, but the reality of the matter is there are certain things that I will speak for some people on, for a majority on, things like 2 + 2 is 4. The waves pound the sand, right? The sky is blue, right? The stars twinkle at night. And critical race theory is nonsense, right? Like this this is where I think that this situation falls into, right? And it's not to say there's no racism in the world, right? We all know that there are racist people out there. As long as they're human beings, they're going to be assholes. There's no, there's no legislation that's, the de-assholification legislation, of 2021 that's going to eliminate all jerks in the world, right? But in the end, saying it's systemic is a whole nother thing. And the only thing that I see in that's systemic right now is this crazy message from people like Sunrise.org, Black Lives Matter globalist network, which is the real name for Black Lives Matter, the organization. It's there. The left is the AOC messaging, which is the same, right? AOC came up, as we showed in episode 2, that AOC came up with these guys with Sunrise.org. She went back to visit them, and we displayed that. But this is what's infiltrating the system. This is what's in all the universities. This is what's everywhere, right? And for that, on that note, right, that we know that this is all the information that really is systemic. How does this pervade? How does the media, how does the media engage itself in this type of craziness? Do you think that the media, you think they're all in a tank? Or do you think that maybe some of them are, and then there are other ones who really do believe it? Like they're part of those generations. We're at that point now where they're a part of those generations, where this is what they've heard. This is what they've been taught. They've grown up their whole life with this. But if they're going to report a story about it, it makes perfect sense to them, right? Like no alarm goes off. Which side do you think they're on?
Well, and I don't know that. I think it's a mixture, George. What we're seeing right now is there's a lot of people out there that, they're doing what they're doing to keep their job. And unfortunately, they're putting their principles secondary to their paycheck. Sometimes easier said than done. But the fact of the matter is, it's not like they're stupid people. Yeah, some of them have been raised with that culture, but there's a whole bunch of them that recognize what's going on. But for whatever reason, they're choosing to keep their mouths shut. And it's a shame.
Hey, I didn't see you there. So
I have something going on here.
You probably said,
go ahead. You let us share your screen?
Not really a thing.
No, I'm just, that accidentally got triggered. That was like on my own computer.
You got triggered?
In our show. Sorry about that.
You got triggered?
I was trying to pull up my doc. I have a doc here to give an example of how that messaging is systemic and what they're saying is systemic isn't, right? So I'm here making the case that Sunrise.org's message, Black Lives Matter Global Network, and the entire leftist agenda in general is what's systemic. Well, what would make it systemic, right? It would have to be a part of our social systems, right? So far they've got these police incidents, right? That's it. After the police incidents, they're done. You don't hear anything from anybody about this systemic anything after the police incidents, okay? Because they don't want to touch college enrollment, right? They don't want to touch that, right? That's a scenario where Asians are getting the worst deal out of the college enrollment piece. But the point is that so are Indians and so are white people. But like white people are like third on that list. There are other people getting screwed even more than whites when it comes to college acceptance and the quotas that have to be met. Right.
Hey, George, I got to tell you something. So I got a buddy of mine, right? And he's from Africa. And he got from USC, he got a scholarship. So he does his whole thing and he goes there and they said, well, you're not African-American. He goes, I'm from Africa and I live in America. But... But he didn't fit the total mold.
African-American doesn't, like, you could be from Haiti and you'd be more African-American than you are from being from Africa.
Well, but not only that, but he just didn't fit the whole scheme. He didn't fit the color scheme. He didn't fit any of that. And so they sent him away.
No way. No.
Yeah way.
That's crazy. I mean, I'm not surprised, but it is a little. it is a little disturbing that once, like it's one thing if they said, "Oh man, you know, we dropped the ball on this one and kind of moved on," but these guys are saying, you know, this is another thing that they're saying. They're saying, "No, we're actually going to change our mind."
And I get that. Of course, I get that anecdotal. This is the story the guy told me, and he's a friend of mine. I have no reason not to believe him, but take it for what it's worth.
Right. And yeah, and what I was, and like getting back to the systemic piece, and that was a good example of it too, by the way. But we posted a document here, right? That is an actual government training, right, on race, and it's difficult conversations about race is what it's called. Okay, and it's an actual PDF that you can read. It's like a true document from the training, right? So, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing with you, but just this is the kind of thing. So they're basically go through this entire training where they're basically they're referring to white managers, right, and white leadership on how to recognize your whiteness and to understand how that impacts others and how to recognize the race in others. It's basically another form of forcing everyone to look at race first, right? Like that's it. That's all, and that's all critical race theory is. Okay, it's just another. You know, we talked about this constant message of division that is trying to be pumped out there, right? Right? That we're going to put something out there, and then we're going to go to the other side. We're going to give them something, and then we're just going to stand back and let them all go at it, right? Like all lives matter, Black Lives Matter, right? So Black Lives Matter comes out, then what happens? Sounds like a good thing. All lives matter, right? We all kind of agree all lives matter, right? No one wants to be on the wrong side of that. But what did they know when that started? They knew that it was going to piss off Black Lives Matter, right? So and that's it. You just throw it out there. The conservative crowd will take it from there, right? And we don't even know we're doing it, right? So and I say we because I am conservative minded, although I do know that it's being done, but most don't, right? So most hear all lives matter, and it becomes this great counter cry, right? And here they go, and their intentions are good, and you know all lives matter, this and that, but they don't realize that entire concept was created to make sure you stay in your box. Right?
Yeah, it's sowing the seeds. You know, it's sowing the seeds of division. So, there's a ton of money in race baiting. I mean, that's been out there for years. There's a whole industry built around that doesn't want to see it collapse, just like the oil and gas industry, for example, right? And you know, so that's one thing, and then. On the other side of it, you know what?
Yeah, this is much different than oil and gas, though.
I just threw that was off the top of my head. I'll come up with another one later. So give me a pass on that one. So, but you know, united we stand, divided we fall, right? And that's really what it's all about is let's keep everybody divided. Let's keep everybody afraid. Let's keep everyone suspicious of each other. And
yeah.
That's no good, you know, and that's really why that's going to be pretty much a common theme among all of our shows is pointing out a lot of the division that's taking place across a variety of fronts, including this message of critical race theory.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if people walk like I don't want people, and you know, look, we're new at this, so if we're not getting the message off the way it's intended. You know, let us know in the comments. But in the end, the intention here is to point these things out, not so that we can give you ammunition to go fight with somebody, right? We're just trying to open up the argument to the point where, you know, you're understanding that these things that seem like they're on the right side of your argument, you're playing their game. You're playing their game. And I'm not saying don't say facts. So obviously, we want to arm you with the facts. We want you to be equipped more so than arm you. You know, we want to equip you to be able to find your own facts, you know, so that you're not, you know, dependent on, and you'll have us as one of your sources to be able to go to and go and dig stuff up, right? But to become minded when you're reading an article, to critically read the article and read it in a way. You know, a lot of the research, the documents that we provide start with articles, right? We go into an article, we're reading it. It's like, really? That's an interesting take. How does he back that up? Hopefully there's a source in there. If there's not a source in there to back up what they're saying, I delete the article. I just delete it. I'm not interested. Opinions are like assholes. Everyone's got one. I don't need to get involved with that. But if there is some sources in there and there are links in there, well, now it might be intriguing. Now it might be something to go ahead and dig through. So I'll go follow the source. Then that source may be another article which has a source. And you just kind of take that down the path until you get to what the actual facts are, right? And they're there. You just can't Google stuff and expect what pops up in your search to be the answer. It'll be one version of the answer, usually a very left-leaning version of the answer. I have yet to see a legitimate fact check site pop up. Every single one of them has some. They're all spin doctors, and you know, there's no trail of them. They're all brand new. They all just started with this Facebook nonsense. A few of them, even like Reuters and stuff, put in these twisted. There are zero fact check articles that talk about something that debunks something that's from the left. None.
Yeah, and I want to bring something up, George, if you don't mind, because I want to make sure I reiterate what you said, because you use the word left a lot, and the fact of the matter is
I don't say Democrat on purpose.
Okay, yeah, and really, what we're really talking about here is socialists. It's a socialist agenda, and so far left. No, yeah. I just want to make sure we have that distinguishment.
Yeah, there's a difference, right? So you'll hear me say left and leftist a lot. You don't hear me say Democrat a lot. Okay. Once in a while, I'll say it if I'm specifically talking about something the party did as a party. But there's a difference between a Democrat from the standpoint of a classic liberal Democrat, what the party was founded on, and that includes that. And I'm talking about the good people that were Democrats, not the politicians in the past that were Dixie Democrats and everything else. I mean that the dude who's like 60, 70 now, you know, maybe 50 now, who traditionally his whole life voted for Democrats because he's pro-union. I mean, I long for those old arguments, right? Like let's argue about union labor. Let's argue about, let's debate this. The issues that they had were not this, okay? What a leftist is the psycho-progressive that has been around for a long, long time, but is now like the sunrise.org people. These are not Democrats. They're not even liberals. They're leftists. Okay. So good point, Jack. That is a distinction. Understand that distinction when I speak, because I did not clarify that. So I appreciate that, Jack. It's not all the same thing. Just like a conservative is not equated to a Republican, right? It's not, it's a philosophy, right? It's a belief system. There's one party that represents it more than another, so they tend to vote that way. But it's not, you know, there are plenty of conservatives that like libertarian candidates as well. All right, it's just that they're opposed to the leftists. So what? And to give you an idea, right? So we've got all this information pumping in. The government's training people. You know, universities are pumping this stuff into people. Everybody's on this page. It seems like it's, you know, we talk about it like society's gone this way, right? Society today has gone this way. But has it really? Do you really know? And this is one of those things. This is one of the things that put me down these paths. Like, Jack, do you really know? And I know that we're both conservative-minded people, right? So people may argue, well, because you're conservative-minded, of course, everyone in your social circle is going to be conservative, right? But I'm not even talking about just the people you know. I'm just talking about people acquaintances, people you encounter every day. You know, people at the office, people, you know, wherever. Like, how many people do you know that when they hear these crazy stories come out, go, yeah, that's good. Screw Pepe. Yeah, get rid of Pepe Le Pew. Yeah, can't believe it. That misogynist. I can't believe they're pumping out the children, right? Like, how many people actually believe in defunding the police?
Yeah,
right?
They don't. They just don't.
They don't.
I mean, it's a very, very small segment of the population
with a really, really loud microphone.
Yeah, and unfortunately, they're getting the attention and they're getting money. And we touched on that a little bit last week. We won't drift back into the politics, but we did a money trail, and I'm sure we'll do those money trails again. And who's funding this and why? But, for today's topic, let's forget about, who's going to benefit from critical race theory continuing to be the prevailing message that's being stuffed down people's throat. Because the minorities certainly aren't going to benefit from it.
Right.
It's not going to do anything to help.
And that's just my only point with that is nobody believes this crap. It's a few people with really loud microphones. They've got the media pumping it, but like in the end, nobody believes this crap. I mean, there are some, but above the age of 22 or what? Yeah, 22 is the college grad age, right? So, after college, right? There are very few people who believe in this. I mean, these are all young minds that have been poisoned to believe this, because like we showed in our intro to episode 2, right? I thought that was great. It was a clip from the beginning of Out of the Shadows where he's like, how do we know what we know? Every single thing that we know, we learned from somewhere. Somebody told us, and we either just absorbed it and ingested it, or we looked into it and validated it, or we experienced it. But there's nothing we don't know that falls under that. There's nothing that we know that falls under that category, that doesn't fall under that category, right? So in the end, when you look at what they're pumping with the systematic racism and the critical race theory, the goal is to get everyone to define everything by race. And I want to give you a quick course here. It's a few-minute video. It's Prager University. They just texted this to me as if they knew we were doing the show on this today. And I found it to be a good, as Prager University, if you're not familiar with them, they're very good at putting together civil arguments, like civil, without going crazy and bashing and going off on people, but breaking down the reality of a situation.
Have you heard about critical race theory? I'm guessing you probably have. It has already insinuated itself into many institutions and is making rapid progress into others. If it takes hold, it will completely change the very nature of America and the way you live. Critical race theory holds that the most important thing about you is your race. The color of your skin, that's who you are. Not your behavior, not your values, not your environment. Your race. In critical race theory, if you are a member of a minoritized racial group, their term, not mine, you are a victim of a system that is rigged against you, a system that doesn't want you to succeed. On the other hand, if your race is privileged, you're an exploiter, whether you intend to be or not. Critical race theory begins from the assumption that racism occurs in all interactions. To see how this works, consider this thought experiment. Imagine you own a shop and 2 customers enter at the same time, one white and one black. Who do you help first? If you help the black person first, critical race theory would say you did so because you don't trust black people to be left alone in your store. That's racist. If you help the white person first instead, critical race theory would say you did so because you think blacks are second-class citizens. That's racist too. That's critical race theory. It can find racism in anything, even if it has to read your mind to do it. Critical race theory is a uniquely American invention. Brewed up at Harvard Law School in the 70s, now part of the academic and media mainstream, it is also uniquely un-American because it rejects the core tenets of the American, classically liberal Judeo-Christian value system. It turns the bedrock American idea upside down. Here it is in the words of Richard Delgado and Gene Stefanchik, 2 leading proponents. Critical race theory questions the very foundations of the liberal order, including equality theory, legal reasoning, Enlightenment rationalism, and the neutral principles of constitutional law. It does this because critical race theory proponents assume racism is present everywhere and always, and they look for it critically until they find it. And they always find it. It has to be there because that's how the imperial European powers and then America set things up. Here, as in all dangerous academic theories, there is a kernel of truth. Human beings were not preoccupied with race until the 16th century, when Europeans began to explore and then colonize other parts of the world. Drawing distinctions between the races reached its peak in the 19th century with the widespread use of slave labor in North and South America. No one denies this. But since then, the Western world, and most especially America, has spent a lot of time, money, and blood breaking free of its racist past. It's been a rocky road for sure, but great progress has been made. Critical race theory says all this progress is a mirage. Racism never died, never even faded a little bit. It just hid itself better. Critical race theory, therefore, is not a continuation of the civil rights movement. It is, in fact, a repudiation of it. To critical race theorists, Martin Luther King was both wrong and naive. White Americans can never judge blacks by the content of their character. They can only judge them, always unfavorably, consciously or unconsciously, by the color of their skin. Ironically, not since the Aryan obsession in Germany in the 1930s and 1940s, or South African apartheid in the second half of the 20th century, has the social movement been so obsessed with race. Critical race theory is then, in a very real sense, a counter-American revolution. But that's a positive, not a negative to those who subscribe to the theory. The American experiment was given a 400-year tryout, and it doesn't work. So let's scrap it. That's what they believe. Is that what you believe? I'm going to guess that most of you don't. So how do we stop critical race theory before it infects the brains of too many decent Americans, especially young people, and turns us into something we have never been and shouldn't ever want to be? The answer is simple. Refuse to accept it. Don't be intimidated by the heads I win, tails you lose logic of this self-destructive, America-hating, anti-reality idea. Don't be bullied into thinking that you're racist when you know you're not, or that you're a victim when you know you're not. Defend yourself while you still can.
Right, and it was a little bit long, but I thought it was well done and well spoken and a good breakdown. And I think one of the cool things about it was the acknowledgement that there hasn't been a movement that was that focused on race since the Aryan movement of Hitler and the apartheid in South Africa, right? And if you think about it, like that one kind of stopped me when I first watched the video, and I'm trying to think, of movements of that size that can equate to that. And like, sure, a leftist, because in a leftist head, they'll be like, well, white supremacy. I'll just be like, all right. Like I went in and I looked right at white supremacist organizations because I'm thinking, how big, like, who's in the KKK now? Like, where's the KKK been, right? So I go in and I start looking at some of these, some of their websites and trying to get some article sources and stuff, because how many members they have is it's not something you grab from a government website. So I felt like getting a number from their websites likely would be overblown, but would be a good place to start. And when I went in, I got to be honest, like it's so embarrassing for them how few members they actually have. I mean, it's estimated the KKK has 3,000 members in the entire of 324 million people. There are 3,000 people scattered in multiple states, right? that are claim themselves to be, or at least the KKK claims are in the KKK, right? I don't think the KKK is downplaying its numbers, right? That would kind of defeat the purpose, right? So like, but then I'm like, who else is there? Like, what are all these other, because I keep hearing them say, oh, there's all these other groups. Like, it's not just the KKK, it's the skinheads and the Nazis, and you don't even know some of the groups. So I was like, all right, let me go look some up. So, and again, you got to go by the group's own, tales of what their membership is. I guarantee you they're overblown. But we're talking about, so there's an organization called the American Renaissance, right? So on their website, they tout this record crowd of participants that they had on their at an event that they held, right? This record number of participants was 300 people, right? This is the most they've ever gotten. They set a record with this 300 people. So you're looking at a small, you could put 300 people in like a school cafeteria. You know what I'm saying? So like this is not, these are not massive organizations. The organization had claimed, or it was said that the organization, again, this is all through hearsay, but like they're expected through their own words to have about 50 to 60 members. Okay. And but they've got them in like 30 states. right? So like it's literally like one member in certain states, like just holding it down and representing the state, so that they can turn around and go, we're represented in 30 states, nationwide. But it's like, dude, it's like 2 people, 1 person in each state. Like nobody's down with this, right? And we just had the White Lives Matter protests, right? So did you get a chance to look at how successful that was?
Yeah, that was in Huntington Beach. Is that the one you're talking
they were
about?
all over the country. Oh, it was a national effort. The media was warning us about how we're all bracing ourselves for what could come about from the white supremacy movement of White Lives Matter. I mean, there weren't more than 15 people at any one of these rallies. The best one, and they've taken this video down from YouTube. If anybody can find this on YouTube, please let me know what the link is. In New Mexico, in Albuquerque, there was one guy that showed up, and there were images in this video of like all these Black Lives Matter protesters and all these anti-white supremacist protesters like descending on this guy, right? And the police have like formed a wall around him, and he was the protest, right? Like he like texted himself in the morning like, "You ready? I'm pumped." Like
guess who's in the minority, right? Guess who's in the minority? Racist.
It was trippy.
Go figure.
Watching the visuals, Jack, you would have died. I couldn't find the actual. But the point is, there's no epidemic of white supremacy in this country. I dare look. If someone could demonstrate to me without some philosophical jargon, but you can like show me, a better list of because I just started seeing trends in how many people are in these organizations. I went through about 7 or 8 of them, and they were all like 150. The biggest one was still the KKK at 3,000. But again, anywhere you grab these numbers from is what I was slowly realizing is that they're not going to you're going on someone else's word. There's no membership log. There's no tax filing of how many members. There's none of that. And if there is, again, I'm not trying to prove something right or wrong. I'm telling you what I found. Right. So, maybe check out what's the local KKK chapter near you. Right. I'm sure they're all over the place. Right. We got this mass problem with the KKK. So anyway, off that topic, I did want to kind of talk about the other side. Right. And sort of what's the right way to think. Right. So like we're sitting here thinking, and it's not that I'm telling you what the right way to think is, but I think, the way I was raised and the way that I raised my children, and Jack, the way you raise your children is what? Did we raise them? Because we didn't get the critical race theory advantage, right? So how did we do it? I mean, did you raise them to like make sure that they were sensitive to every race that they find and that, make sure that you mentally process, what type of race the person is you're talking to, what you can say, what you can't say. I mean, is that how you raise your kids?
I raised my kids with just the age-old concept of treat people the way you want to be treated, regardless, of anything else. There's good people and there's bad people, and avoid the bad ones and surround yourself with good ones. It doesn't. I never had the discussion regarding race or religion or anything else. I never put another human being in a box when I was having a conversation with my kids. And
that's it.
Yeah, it's just simple. It's
Very
just
simple.
People are people. That's it.
That's it.
So
and most of us, when we teach our children things, if a situation ever comes up, where they have a question, because today it comes up. Like now, raising kids today, your kids are older now, right? So mine are still, middle school, just entering high school sort of thing. When you have a conversation, the key is, before this was an issue, what I tell them is, look, exactly what you said. Like, don't worry about it. Don't look at race. It doesn't matter, right? I didn't even have to really tell it to my kids.
Yeah, neither did I.
It's not an issue for them naturally because it's just how they were raised. Like, it's just how they were raised. I mean, and it's not something. The more I inject this into their lives, the more poison they become. And that concept was actually echoed by Morgan Freeman in a very famous interview on 60 Minutes.
I was just thinking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and run.
Black History Month you find
ridiculous.
Why?
You're going to relegate my history to a month?
Oh, come on.
What do you do with yours? Which month is White History Month? No, well, come on, tell me.
Well, I'm Jewish.
Okay, which month is Jewish History Month?
There isn't one.
Oh, why not?
Yeah.
Do you want one?
No.
I don't either. I don't want a Black History Month. Black history is American history.
How are we going to get rid of racism until...
Stop talking about it. I'm going to stop calling you a white man.
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop calling me a black man. I know you as Mike Wallace. You know me as Morgan Freeman. You want to say, well, I know this white guy named Mike Wallace. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so, to me, I don't know, I guess everybody gets a little something different out of that, but the biggest thing in there to me was not to stop talking about it part. The biggest thing for me in there was Black history is American history. And it wasn't so much about the month as it was about trying to say they're two different things. And really that's, and when it was posed to Mike Wallace, so, okay, do you want a Jewish History Month? Immediately, instinctively, he was like, no. Like, why didn't he say, yeah, that might be nice to have, everyone, look at Jewish history in America separately, right? Like that was his point, and George and Morgan Freeman is Morgan Freeman can narrate just about anything, and I'll believe him.
He was God.
Yeah, in this particular case, like his voice, just the Morgan Freeman concept is just, I love Morgan Freeman, but like never more than when he clearly makes this case that Black history is American history, that they're the same thing and they should be taught together. It's not, one should be taught as a part of the other. It's not a matter of, like, oh, well, we're going to teach you now, kids, about Black history by itself, right? We're going to teach you about women's history by itself. The story of women's abolition is American history, right? It's not, these things aren't separate, but they're being separated, right? You see a trend here?
Yeah. Look, I got to jump in because what bothers me about this whole thing, I grew up with Martin Luther King, right? And
you grew up with him? That's pretty cool. You got any pictures? I'm just playing. Go ahead.
When we talk about things like segregation, right? That was the whole main purpose. Break the barriers down and have a greater level of integration. And yet, in today's society, at my own kid's high school, they have a Black graduation. And why are you intentionally separating people all over again? We've come all this way, and now let's divide everybody back again.
Right. And of course, there's an agenda behind that, right? And we heard a lot of that agenda on the Zoom calls we were showing last week, right?
Yeah.
They'll tell you what the agenda is. They didn't mean to tell us that part, right? Millennial Millie went in there and sent a mole in and got those recordings, and that was amazing insight into their world. But yeah, I mean, the good thing about this is that, we tend to look, especially so I'm Generation X. Most of my generation, has grown up looking at millennials like, oh, the millennial, and we've kind of extended the word millennial into like two more generations. like if you go back and look at what the actual millennial generation is, they're in their 30s right now. Like they're not, they're not the young kids that we're talking about. These kids, they're not in the Sunrise.org movement. They've grown out of it, So we're at the point of insulting millennials, and they're like, dude, like I'm over that. Like whatever, you did it too when you were 18, and we're just sitting here still bashing them because we haven't renamed the other generations. Pretty much everything after Generation X, we've kind of dumped into the millennial category, but we don't even realize the millennials are kind of over this nonsense already. I don't know what we're calling Generation Y or what these next generations are being called, Generation Z. If they had no productivity, if they had no creativity, they just start going up with the letters. But like, there's whole different generations coming up now. And I think there is a bright light in the fact that those who did grow up in the actual millennial generation they've kind of turned it around right now. So some of it's stuck in their head, but most of it, they get it. You know, like most of it, they kind of see what's going on, right? And that's why these organizations don't go after adults. They go after kids, right? So, you know, and there are other people, even some people who are in universities today, it's encouraging to know that some of them are fighting back. And when I say fighting back, I mean just like having a logical, fact-based argument, right? And we have that clip of two different scenarios where teachers are professors, right? Not teachers, professors, right? Because these are college professors, right? So these are people that in one day we used to respect and we used to look at in some esteem because you're a university professor, right? Whatever it is that you teach, if you're an English professor, I assume that you know very much about the English language and can help me, you know, write better, you know, read better, whatever the situation may be. Well, that's not the case today, right? In the case today, what you get is these teachers who are activists, clearly activists, and have been so poisoned. These are all teachers. You look at them, they're young, and in the end, they've just graduated from the sunrise.org school mentality of the way society is, and they're imparting that on their students in a way that's almost hostile, right? So let's look at it.
The story behind this picture, I'd rather hold on to that. Just tell me what this seems to be a picture of.
It's just two people chilling.
Right, just two people. There's nothing more to this picture?
Nah, not really. Just two people chilling.
I don't believe that you believe that. I don't believe that you look at this as just two people. I don't think
truly
you
is just two people, though, is it not?
Yeah, but I think you're being intentionally coy about what this is a picture of.
What would I be being coy about? It's two people standing back to back in a picture.
Yeah, and that's all you see is two people.
I'm confused on what you would like me to speak on in that sense.
I don't think you are. I don't know why you do this. I'm not trying to call you out, but you come out off of mute to talk about what this is a picture of, and you act as if you know there's nothing noticeable about this apart from the fact that they're two people.
Well, I'm confused. Are you trying to get me to say that there are two different races in this picture?
Yes,
is that
I
what
am
you
asking
want
you
me
to
to
say
say?
that.
Well, at the end of the day, wouldn't that just be feeding into the problem of looking at race instead of just acknowledging them as two normal people?
No, it's not, because you can't look at the people and not acknowledge that there are racial differences, right?
But if we're going for, let's say if we're looking for equality within all this, then why would we need to point out things such as that?
Because those differences are real things. You can't.
I agree.
Right. So you brought up the police in your speech a few times. So what is your main concern? Since, honestly, the whole reason police, it is systemic. The issue is systemic because the whole reason we have police departments in the first place, where did it stem from? What's our history? Going back to what Jeremy was talking about, what does it stem from? It stems from people in the South wanting to capture runaway slaves.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
Maybe they shouldn't be heroes. Maybe they don't belong on a kid's show.
So I disagree with what Jeremy said about it, because I think cops are heroes and they have to have a difficult job, but we have to have that
all of
fine
them?
life. Oh, I'd say a good majority of them. You have bad people in every business and every part.
Yeah.
Well,
a lot of police officers have committed atrocious crimes and have gotten away with it and have never been convicted of any of it.
And
I
they
say this as a person who has family members who are police officers.
Yes, I understand. And this is what I believe. This is my opinion. And this is, not popular to say, but I do support our police, and we have bad people, and the people that do bad things should be brought to justice. I agree with that. But I think that, say it again.
They haven't.
Well, I agree with you on that point of they should, right?
Okay, so what is your bottom line point? You're saying police officers should be revered, viewed as heroes. They belong on TV shows with children.
I think they are heroes in a sense because they come to your need and they come and help you, and they have a problem just like every other business, but we should fix that. But I think they're heroes. Well, they're
I think that's the problem. It's looking at it as a business because they're actually supposed to protect and serve the people.
They do protect us. What do we call when we're in trouble and someone has a knife or a gun?
I wouldn't call the police.
Why wouldn't you call the police?
I don't trust them. My life's in more danger.
Who would you call?
In their presence.
Professor, who would you call?
I wouldn't call anybody.
Well, would you have if someone intruded your house with a gun? What would you have a gun on you, or who would you call?
It's my time to go.
Okay.
Well, I'm not going to
reach out to in your house with a gun. There's not much you can do at that point. Calling the police is kind of just,
And I know that it's not popular for me to say that to you guys and people in here, but that's what I believe about the police.
Okay.
And,
thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys for listening to my point. I appreciate it. Thanks.
I will say, yeah, I'm glad you did say that, even if I disagree with you. It's important.
And we should fight for the right for people to say things that we don't even like, right?
I may not agree with what you say, but I'll fight for your right to say it.
Amen, brother.
Within some extent, I'll
say. Okay, folks. We
I love the ending. He almost said the right thing. Like and then he couldn't help himself. He was like, saying, I will fight for your right to say it to some extent. Like, it's like, nah, dude, it doesn't work that way. You just fight for the right to say it. Like, let's go back to free speech 101, right? But like both professors in that scenario, these are professors. People go, oh, well, those are just one-offs, and those are not one-offs. This is the way university professors in today's society think. These people are not ostracized in there. They walk into the cafeteria, they hang out around campus. They're perfectly acceptable in their viewpoint, and they're completely stunned and taken off guard by someone who would say, "It's just two people chilling." like, no, you have to see race. You're playing with me now because you're acting like you don't see it, but you see it. And it's like, nah, dude. I'm just saying, it's two people chilling. Like, it's classic. I love both the videos. What do you think about it, Jack?
No, the fact of the matter is that you can see there's no tolerance on one side. And that's really what it speaks to. Even if we were to take what's correct and what's incorrect, what opinion is right, it has to do with the levels of tolerance. And there is no level of tolerance.
Yeah. What kind of grades do you think those kids are going to get?
Yeah.
This is
not
why
good.
They're brave, right?
Not good.
This is why they're brave. Because I guarantee you that there are people on both of those Zoom calls just like just like loving it, right? But like, here's the one guy in class, that's like me, and I've done this on work conference calls and stuff where like I bring things up and I start getting text messages from the rest of the team, like, amen, brother, yeah, all right, yeah, speak the power, yeah, and I'm just bringing up basic stuff that I know that we all agree with, but the stuff that everyone's afraid to bring up, but then there's me, right? And then that's kind of so in that sense, I just think it's very, very telling how angry they're getting and how it's almost like they want to just say, you're destroying my narrative, right? Like you're killing, stop it with the common sense, right? Like, what do you think this is?
What do you think it is? Free speech? Hey, George. Hey, George.
Yeah,
we're getting our first ever VIP video call.
We are.
Yeah, let me see if I can hook this thing up. I'm not sure. Hang on, let me see how. I haven't used it yet.
Please hold for the President of the United Kingdom.
What?
The United States. You know the deal.
Joe? Joe?
You know there's not one single bit of evidence, not one little tiny bit, to suggest anything done was wrong. You know that, but you keep asking me these questions. It's okay. You're doing what you have to do.
Joe, now's not the time to talk about the text I sent you.
Come on, man.
Okay, fine. I mean, you didn't take Hunter's laptop, and now Giuliani's starting to think you put a hit on him.
Well, I'm glad he's acknowledged it's going to be me. He's so worried about me, he got himself in this mix to begin with.
Really? Are you going to push the Illuminati's agenda?
We led the world in the middle of the 20th century. We led the world toward the end of the century. We're going to lead the world again. We're going to lead it again in the 21st century.
Shit, Joe. They're using you as an old friend. What else should I know?
We are really not following the law very well these days.
Great. What have you done?
We have put together, I think, the most extensive and inclusive voter fraud organization in the history of American politics.
God, I need you to answer something else.
No, probably best I don't.
Did you just pop a
Sorry.
bubble? Did you just pop a bubble? Well, I need to ask you something else. Joe?
And just the last question I'll take, and I'm really going to be in trouble.
I get it. I wouldn't want Carmela in my dish. I'll keep it light. Why don't you tell me a fun fact about yourself?
I'm big on ice cream.
Anything else?
And I love kids jumping on my lap.
Well, you know what? I'm going to save that last part for Epstein when he comes back after the takeover. Look, I got to go. Feel free to call me anytime. I'll talk to you later, Joe, all right?
All right, Chuck. Thank you very much.
Wow.
That was pretty amazing. I didn't know you had people, you knew people in those circles, bro. That was, do you think he's all right with the conversations we've been having? I don't,
He won't remember. He won't remember. Even after the rerun, he won't remember.
That was fantastic.
Yeah. Well, he and I, we met in Shoreham, Long Island, when we were both protesting against the nuclear power plants with Jane Fonda. And so I told you I've been around.
That's awesome, Jack. That's awesome, man. I'm looking at you in a whole new light now, bro. I did not know you were that big a deal. I mean, I knew you were a big deal, but this is like your presidential big deal.
Anyone that knows me knows how humble I am,
Excellent. Well, let Joe know. I can bring him some cookies or something if they'll let me in the White House. I just want to see the Oval Office and stuff.
It's ice cream.
Oh, ice
By
cream.
the way, I asked him. I asked him, how does he like the White House? And he said that the basement is so much better at the White House than it is at home. So he's living the high life. Yeah.
That was a nice little break from the the intenseness of the conversation. So good old Joe coming through to help us with a little comic relief. We love him.
I'm telling you, and you never know, as long as we keep this video chat open, what other VIP might call. I have some connections.
That was great. Oh man. So all right, let's get ourselves back on track. So we've been at this conversation for quite a while, and again, I think the main concept and the main point to get across here is to make people fully aware that this is an organizational effort. It's not organic. It's not. These are so-called university professors are actively poisoning people's minds. Okay, and hostily doing so as well. Like children are not, parents may look at it and say, well, I make sure my kids know better, and I hate that the argument that it's all about the parents. I hate that argument because it's like dismissing every kid who has bad parents. It's like, F all the kids with bad parents. It's like just let their heads be poisoned and let them, it's like, come on, like there's bad parents everywhere. Like, what are we kidding ourselves? So like the idea that it's all about the parents, this messaging is something that has to actively be fought against. And I believe, I want to say it's Idaho that just passed a bill to not prohibit critical race theory, but prohibit the coercion and so they're not allowed to, while they're teaching critical race theory, they can't force a student to buy in, which is what they're doing now. So you see how they were hostile.
I don't know if you saw it, but it came out this week. There's a town in the Midwest where a whole bunch of parents went to the school board. They were raising Cain over this, and people started stepping down. The parents started taking over their positions and said, "We've had enough. We're taking our the education system back from you people because we don't approve of the message that you're stuffing down our throat." These kids are coming here for math, English, for science, and you're giving them theory. And it's not even theory that we agree with. Yeah. And so, look, I think one thing that would be great, we don't really have a big enough audience for this, but for whoever is listening, get involved in your schools, show up, go to it's not just the teachers. The teachers wouldn't be doing it if it weren't for the administration, right? Show up at these meetings and have your voice being heard. They're not going to withstand the local pressure, okay? If they think they can get away with it, they will. But if you get in there and you actively press them, they're going to cave. But it's got to be enough parents that are willing to do that and are not willing to allow their kids to fall victim to this. And pulling your kid out and homeschooling them is not the answer. The answer is getting what we paid for, and that's our school system back.
Because you're still paying for the schools, whether you're
still paying for it anyway. Yeah.
And Kathy Burns just brought up that it was an Arizona school. I said Idaho. I saw the news on it a couple of days ago, and it just was escaping me what state it was. But it was an Arizona county apparently that banned the inclusion banned the coercion of critical race theory in universities. So they're not allowed to grade you based on your agreement. Is basically what they're saying, which may just kill the course anyway, because the entire point of the course, if you can't force their agreement, the idea is to get them to be forced to do it so that they get the grade, which most kids are willing to do. It's like, all right, well, if I got to pretend that this is real so that I can get the A, then, what do I got to do, right? I had a philosophy teacher like that. If you wrote any paper about sex, if you incorporated sex into the paper, you got an A. I didn't think it was true. I did it. It worked. I was stunned. I didn't even understand the paper that I handed this guy, and it absolutely got me an A both times around. He was like notorious for it. Generation after generation were telling each other, "Oh, you got him? Just do this." So
well, you know what they say. You know what they say, George. Trust the science.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's who we're trusting, right?
That's good stuff.
All right.
Oh, wait, well, she's telling me she was talking about school board change to what you were saying. Okay, so it might have been Idaho. We'll have to look that up. Just Google law about critical race theory, banning critical race theory, and you'll find it. It's viral right now, so you'll find it somewhere. But let's just go ahead and move on from there. So, all right. So Jack had put together some numbers. I want to quickly go over these. I know we're over the hour, but I don't really care. We got a lot to cover. So we're going to go ahead and show Jack. I'm going to show that video for what they're pumping, like some of their propaganda on this, and then your response to it from a statistics point of view.
Sure.
Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. So if you're like most Americans, you probably say to yourself all the time, systemic racism. Is that really a thing? Did you know that in 2010, Black Americans made up 13% of the population, but only had 2.7% of the country's wealth? That the median net worth for a white family was $134,000, but the median net worth for a Hispanic family was $14,000, and for Black Americans, it was $11,000? Know that the median wealth for a single white woman has been measured at $41,000, but for a Hispanic woman it was $140, and for a black woman $120? Did you know that? Do you know what that's called? That's called systemic racism. And yes, it's really a thing.
Yeah, so so that's from a group called MoveForward.org, and believe it or not, they've been around for 20 years. One of the things that struck me right off the bat was the quality of the video, the quality of production. That comes from, so obviously there's money being pumped into that organization, and it comes from a series of 8 videos. I spliced them all together, and I put them on our website, and so this way people can take a look at them. But when you take a look at the stats that he's throwing out, and I'm thinking, there's nothing that I've heard along those lines. And so I started thinking, well, where is he getting these stats from? And so I wanted to go in and pull up some stats, but just on the surface, if you're a kid and you're hearing this, you're never going to go back and do what we're doing. This took me hours to find. So, you know, what kid's going to do that, right?
And that's what these videos are designed for.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to share my screen. Let me find the button. Let me know when you can see it, Georgie.
Jack's screen joined.
There we go. Okay. All right. So this is the one of the primary sources that I found, and I wanted to throw it up there, but I want everybody to know that all the stats that I'm about to show you, I have links in the website to all of those statistics so that you can look at it, verify it, call me out if you think I miscalculated anything. I'm not here to lay this out from one side or the other. I just want to see what it was. Obviously, the statistics that were presented in the video were correct, but I was curious to see what they were, and so I'm getting to the point. Here we go. I'll blow it up. Okay. All right. So if we start out and we take a look, this is based off of 2018 numbers, George. And if we take a look at first the population, and that shows you your population in the millions, and then the percentage of population by various categories, right? And then if we take a look at the percentage of poverty to the population, we see a jump on Black and Hispanic. We see the Asian with the lowest, and then white with second lowest. And I want you to pay attention to this because I found a common theme here. And I'm not really going to try and say I know exactly why this is, but I came to some conclusions as I started to go down the list here. So if we look over to single parent homes in the millions, right? There's 8.5 million single parent homes for white folks, 6 million for Black, and 7.3 for Hispanic. And then children in single parent homes, the percentage of them. So 24% in the category for white folks, 15 for Asian. It jumps up to 65 for Black and 41 for Hispanic. So as I begin to start my analysis of looking at percentages, you start seeing, and it'll take shape more, but what I started to notice is there's a correlation here, and it remains fairly consistent with who's at the front of the pack and who's going down at the back of the pack. Percentage of degrees awarded, and then the degrees by the population. So white had 0.09. So that's weighed against their population. So, you know, they got, 55.6%, but they're 60% of the overall population. So in that respect, they're down 0.9%. Whereas Asians, they had 6.1. They're 5.56% of the population. So in that regard, they're doing better than average. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
Here.
And for people that aren't getting the point of why these statistics are important, based on that video that we had put up for you just now, it's a classic tactic that gets done where these statistics are thrown around lightly and oftentimes do nothing more than show correlation, but always they will take correlation and imply causation. And if there's anything that anyone who has ever once in their life, and I was a psychology major in my day, I graduated and went halfway through my master's before choosing a different path, doing well all the way through. And one thing you learn in 101 class is correlation never, ever implies causation. Okay? There could be causation as a result, but it takes a completely different thing to go look for the causation. And what Jack's pointing out to you here is that there are factors that are involved in why there are discrepancies. And those factors are not systemic racism. Race is not, or racism at all. That has nothing to do with the color of someone's skin as to why these numbers get generated. It's this demand that they have for equal outcome. And Jack is demonstrating why that's not so, because single parent families of any race are clearly, every statistical analysis has always shown, if you're born into a single parent family, the odds of success, or the odds of being in poverty are greatly higher than not being in poverty. Than not being in poverty, but in being in a 2-parent household. So that's why he's pointing this out to you. Go ahead, Jack. Sorry to.
No. All very good points. So, when we move into the employment statistics and we look at what's called the Common Job Index workforce. So what that is anywhere from bus drivers to nurses to management. And we're not talking executive management. We're talking about mid-level management. So when we look at the job index, it shows you that in that 79% of those jobs are held by white folks, 6.59 by Asian, 14.36 by Black. And for some reason, they didn't have Hispanic into the mix, right? So again, I'm only looking for correlation, not causation. So when I come down here and I look at the average of all of those jobs, the pay average was $51,000. So let's see how each category fared. So we see that in the category of white folks, they made $812 more than the average. Asians made $5,300, almost $5,400 over the average. And then Black folks made $6,000 below the average. Now, I don't know why that is. There's a lot of factors in employment, how long you've been there, a variety of things. There's really no way to tell. But what's interesting when you make the correlation is when you continue to take a look at in the classification for the Asian community, they have a high level of people, higher than normal, that are graduating from college. They have the lowest level of single family homes, the lowest level of poverty, which has equated to the highest level of income. So those, again, are the correlations that George is talking about. I have no way bases these statistics to tell you why these things occur. I have to guess, and it's my guess, that this is not an indication of systemic racism, especially because systemic racism is predicated upon the white community being racist. If that were the case, then why would they be allowing the Asians to make, $5,300, over the average when they're only making 12, right? So that's anecdotal. As I move down and I look at, all right, leadership. So let's take a look at leadership from a systemic racism standpoint. And what we find is that in the 100 largest cities in the United States, 44% of the mayors are in a minority. And in that minority, the population is more than 50% white for those states. So again, from a systemic racism standpoint, there's no proof of this, but common sense tells me that if I have the majority of the population white and they're still voting for minority, and again, I don't see any evidence there. And then when I look in California, I look at the percentage of Congress that are minorities. So Congress, the representation, 63% of it is minorities. So from a leadership standpoint, I see that, there's not things that are holding back minorities from getting into leadership and representing their communities. And I think that that's a fair assessment. And then when I looked at hate crime, because you hear so much about this, and I really wanted to find out, well, all right, if this is a racist society, what do the numbers look like? And I couldn't find the level of detail at the U.S. level. It's about 7,000 hate crimes per year, but I couldn't get this type of detail, what I'm about to show you. But so that tells you that there's about 500 or so per state, somewhere in there, quick math. But if we were to take a look at the three categories where there's the most hate crime, this lays out how many folks are the percentage of the population in California, how many folks that have had a hate crime perpetrated against them, and then what is the 10-year trend? And over the last 10 years, it's dropped by 25% against Black folks, 16.5% against the LGBT community. Surprisingly, it's risen 10.2% against the Jewish community. But thinking about how worried should we be as a society, can I go out and, am I going to get attacked? Well, if you look at 300 Black folks per year that are a victim of a hate crime, that's 1/100th of 1% of the Black population in California. Very, very small incidence in comparison to the overall population. And then the last thing
the police too, right? I said those types of percentages are very similar to the amount of people that are killed, even without just Black people, just everyone that's killed in a police altercation unarmed. The statistics are very similar to that.
Yeah, and no doubt. Now, I didn't look at the killings. There's enough people looking at that. But in the policing, so there in 2019, they have a force event statistic. And that's when the police were forced to use force. There were 210 incidents against white citizens, 144 against Black, and 329 against Hispanic. I don't see any, gigantic difference. And we can talk about in terms of percentage of the population, but I think the number was, I can pull it back up and I'll get it on the website. I think out of 100% of these cases, 70% of them were a response to a call. And that's important because if, that takes out the notion of people being targeted. The police are actually being called to these incidents. And out of those incidents, 255 police officers were injured. So
everyone's getting a raw deal.
Well, yeah. Well, the police officers, you know, when you think about it, you know, they're exposed to a high level of, you know, potential threat. And so it's no wonder that they have to take action very quickly because a lot of them get hurt. I mean, so again, I don't really see, I'm going to shut this down. I really don't see any evidence of what they would call systemic racism. You know, but the fact of the matter is, like you said at the beginning, racism does exist. We're not here to say it doesn't, but we are here to look at, you know, data and correlations. And as you said, it doesn't determine causation. That's just something that is kind of theorized. And you can theorize just about anything off of numbers.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? You can have a lot. Look, I left psychology. I left the field of psychology largely because, number one, it began to start boring the hell out of me. But more importantly, statistics were really, I was looking at them in the way that they can be perverted and utilized, even though their intentions were good, and the way they were perverted and utilized, it just turned me off to the whole profession. And I have a lot of respect for psychologists. There are plenty of good ones out there, you know, and I'm not even going there. It's just on a personal level. I didn't, you know, the statistics piece, you know, while I understood the logic and the theory behind them, I understood the sample size points of view. I just, the way people interpreted them and used them, it turned me off, and I kind of started leaving it. So, but those statistics that were pulled up here were kind of hard statistics. Those were just, you know, how many people, you know, a hard statistic, if you're not aware of what that is just like, you know, how many Black families are in single parent households, or how many Black children are growing up in single family households. That's a hard statistic. There's no opinion there. It's not conjecture. There's this many families. Now, obviously, you know, there may be families that didn't get recorded in the census or whatever, but it's as hard a data as you can get. You got a number of families. How many of them have one parent? It is what it is. The cards fall where they are. That's a hard statistic. Soft statistics would be the implications that get made afterwards, kind of like what you saw in those videos, where the statistics are out there, and then you go ahead and make a video and interpret them for yourself, right? Now, you can look up your own numbers on poverty levels, the difference in poverty levels between children that grow up in single-parent families and children that grow up in two-parent families. But those statistics have been consistently in favor of two-parent families forever. And it doesn't have to be a mother and a father. It could be just, it's two parents, okay? Two parents. Because the reasons aren't because of straightness or anything like that. The reasons are because there's two people to support. Okay, there's in most cases today two incomes. In some cases one income, but the other person gets to stay home and focus on the kids. So there's a lot of reasons behind why that statistic is, but the reality is it's true. And no one wants to talk about that in any of these movements. Nobody wants to talk about that. There are plenty of Black leaders who do. Thomas Sowell is one of them. There's Larry Elder. There's a bunch of them out there who Ben Carson talks about it. Well, there's a lot of them out there, but you don't see them in these mainstream movements. These people don't care, right? And that's kind of something that's important to point out.
Are you getting ready to play a video?
I am. So Jack last week talked to you about his upcoming You Don't Know Jack episode that would be geared towards conformity. So he has put that together. I want to take a second to kind of go through that, and then we'll start to wrap it up after that. You got anything else, Jack?
No, I'm good.
Perfect. All right. Well, with that being said, without further ado.
Today I'm going to delve into the topic of conformity, because it sure seems like one side of the story is being shouted from rooftops while the other side is being censored. And if you don't conform to the rooftop narrative, you're one of a dozen labels I've heard. Let's start with the definition. Conformity is the imitation of behaviors and beliefs that are socially acceptable. In many instances, the pressure to conform can be enormous. A prime example is social media. Social media creates a web of conformity that has led to a major increase in neurosis in many adults, but especially in our youth. The level of anxiety and depressive mood has skyrocketed in the last 10 years, along with teen suicide and drug use. There is an excellent film on this called The Social Dilemma on Netflix. The pressure to conform can also lead to a lot of uncertainty because a one-sided message often contains elements of the truth. Here is where the nonconformist comes in. The nonconformist is the child that asks why and won't accept because I told you so. So let's start moving from problem to solution. Before we get started, I would like to encourage you to do this with your friends and family. Together, you gain greater perspective and can practice in healthy debate. So let's begin. First, let's sharpen our critical thinking skills. There is a section on our website called Analyze This. It breaks down the elements of critical thinking into 5 bite-sized pieces using the Watson-Glaser test as a model. Watson-Glaser is a test devised to evaluate lawyers in the UK, and it's used by firms as part of their hiring practice. It doesn't take long to complete this section and the test at the end, but putting it in practice will have lifelong benefits. The second step is to visit the You Don't Know Jack section of our website. You can find it by clicking on Tank Shortcuts. Here you'll find the topic of conformity. This video will be posted for a refresher or for those you share it with. Click on the button named Learn More once you've watched the video. Step 1 is a detailed discussion of conformity, citing a number of great thinkers throughout time. Step 2 is a short video on a classic experiment that was conducted in 1951 and it's still in use today. The activity is to compare this with your social media experiences, such as reposting something you weren't fully bought into. Step 3 is a video I love, and even if you've seen it, it's fun to watch again. Here is another exercise listed for you to do. Step 4 is a short video on groupthink. That sets the stage for putting your critical thinking cap on. Step 5 provides the instruction to execute on the rest of the exercise. It asks you to watch 2 separate videos on one of today's biggest hot button topics. The topic is covered from 2 totally different perspectives. Next, use your critical thinking skills to draw your own conclusion. That ends this week's installment of You Don't Know Jack. I'm going to close with a quote by Friedrich Nietzsche, who said, "No price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself." With that in mind, remember, the next time someone pushes a narrative and offers no evidence that you can confirm, exercise the power of nonconformity and recognize they don't know Jack.
That's the fact, Jack! That's a fact, Jack!
I love that ending.
Yeah, it's one of my faves for sure. So yeah, great piece there, Jack. Please, guys, check out the website. Definitely, get yourself immersed in there a little bit. Jack's been working really hard on that. There's a ton of really good information there, and it's constantly being updated. We will also have any and all sources. I put some of the links in the comments, but there are more on the website to the information that we use in each episode. You can go into the episode and then just click on it, and you'll see beneath the video the laundry list of links and sometimes explanations on how to handle those links. So, you know, another great episode. This one went a little bit longer, but all good. We had quite a bit to cover, so no apologies here. Jack, you got any last words?
Yeah. So one of the things that I really want to make clear is that the purpose of the website is for people to look at issues and come to their own conclusion, because too many people, at least in my opinion, find sources that they trust. And George and I aren't looking for you to trust us implicitly. Too many people look at, oh, I trust this person, I trust that person, maybe because they've been watching them for years and they're that known face or that known voice. But I think the message needs to be, don't trust anybody. Figure it out for yourself, because it's way too easy to distort things. And you know, George and I are finding out it does take some work to get down and start figuring things out. But it's worth it, because otherwise, you know, at the end of the day, it's your mind. You need to own it. And if you're not interested, somebody else will own your mind for you.
Nice. Absolutely. So folks, like us on Facebook, please follow us on Facebook. We are trying to get to 100 subscribers on YouTube as a first small soft target. We have done zero promotion for the show outside of, you know, Facebook friends are just kind of throwing it out there. So if you've stumbled upon us and you like what you saw, please, by all means, subscribe, click the bell. We're trying to get to that 100 mark to get as our first small milestone, and we can go from there. So thank you, everyone. We will be ready next week, same time, Saturday, 1 p.m.
And like that,